There is a story nobody tells you about the most compassionate person in the room, not the one about how beautiful their heart is, or how much they give, or how everyone leans on them. No, this is the other story. The one where that same person, the most loving person you have ever met, the one who would cancel their own plans to sit with someone in pain, the one who remembers everyone's birthday and checks in when the world has forgotten, the one who cries at commercials and feels strangers' grief like it is their own, that person, at some point, ends up in a relationship, or a family, or a workplace, where something slowly, quietly starts stealing from them. Not their money, not their time, though yes, their time too, something deeper. It steals their voice, their certainty, their right to take up space, and the terrifying part, they let it happen. Not because they are weak, but because they are so extraordinarily good at believing the best in people that they keep waiting for the person draining them to finally become who they were always sure they could be. If that landed somewhere in your chest just now, I want you to stay with me. Because this episode is not just about narcissism. It is about you. It is about why someone like you, someone with a heart this size, keeps ending up in these situations. And more than that, it is about the possibility, the very real, very spiritual possibility, that you were not randomly selected to suffer here. That maybe, just maybe, your presence in this dynamic was not an accident. That you were appointed for something much bigger than surviving it. Let us start with something that psychology has quietly known for years, but rarely says out loud in a way that feels personal. Highly empathetic people are not just attracted to suffering, they are gravitationally pulled toward it. There is a concept called trauma bonding, and it is not about weakness or stupidity or naivety. It is about the neurological reality that your nervous system, which was designed to feel deeply, actually registers intense emotional highs and lows as connection. When someone makes you feel like the most important person in the room one day and invisible the next, your brain does not file that under dangerous inconsistency. Your brain files it under thrilling, under meaningful, under this must be real love because I have never felt anything this consuming. And narcissists, whether they are clinically diagnosed or simply operating from deeply wounded self-protective survival patterns, narcissists are extraordinarily gifted at creating exactly that kind of consuming intensity. They find you. They find the person whose empathy runs so deep that it feels like a supernatural gift, and they treat that gift like a resource. They do not even always know they are doing it. That is the part that breaks people like you the most. You keep thinking, if they knew how much they were hurting me, they would stop. But that thought, right there, is the trap. Because you are measuring them by your own moral compass. And their compass was built differently. Here is what I want you to hear, not as a warning, but as a permission slip. The reason you keep making excuses for them is not a character flaw. It is actually evidence of one of your greatest gifts. You have the ability to hold multiple truths at once. You can say this person is hurting me, and this person is also hurting themselves. You can say I do not like how they behave, and also I understand the wound underneath the behavior. That dual awareness, that capacity to see beneath the surface of a person's ugliest moments, is extraordinary. It is rare. It is genuinely, profoundly rare. The problem is not that you have it. The problem is that you have been using it as a reason to stay in pain, rather than as a tool to recognize what you are actually dealing with and choose yourself anyway. So let us talk about the signs, because that is what you came here for, and I am not going to make you wait any longer. There are specific, identifiable patterns that show up in people who are not just accidentally entangled with a narcissist, but who seem to have been placed there with purpose. And when I say purpose, I do not mean the kind that romanticizes suffering. I mean the kind that is forged in fire and comes out on the other side as something the world desperately needs. The first sign is that you have always been the one who sees people. Not surface level sees them, but actually sees them. You notice when someone's smile does not reach their eyes. You pick up on the slight change in someone's tone before they have admitted to themselves that something is wrong. You have been told your whole life that you are perceptive, intuitive, an old soul, too sensitive, and in your relationship with this person, you were the first one, often the only one, who saw the pain underneath their control. You saw the frightened child hiding behind the cruelty. And that perception, that insistence on seeing the full human being rather than just the behavior, is the beginning of what you were sent to do. Because here is the truth about people who break narcissistic control patterns. not just for themselves, but within entire family systems, entire workplaces, entire generational cycles. They are almost always the ones who saw clearly when everyone else looked away. They are the ones who could not unsee the truth once it appeared. And that is you. You have been sitting with knowledge that makes your bones ache because you already know, somewhere deep in your cells, what is happening to you. The question is whether you are going to let yourself act on what you know. The second sign is that your suffering has been disproportionate. What I mean is this. Something about your experience with this person has felt like more than just a difficult relationship. It has felt like a dismantling. Like they found the exact location of every insecurity you ever buried and pressed on it over and over with terrifying precision. You started questioning things about yourself that you never questioned before. Your memory, your perceptions, your sanity, your worth. You began apologizing for things you did not do and explaining yourself in circles until you could not remember what you were even defending. That level of psychological disruption, that specific pattern of being made to feel like the problem when you are actually the witness to the problem, is not just unfortunate, it is initiatory. Initiation is a concept that humans have understood for thousands of years across almost every culture. It is the idea that certain experiences exist not to destroy you, but to strip away the parts of you that were never truly yours. The people-pleasing, the self-abandonment, the belief that your worth is conditional on how useful you are to someone else. A narcissist, in the most painful and paradoxical way imaginable, is extraordinarily effective at burning all of that down. And the question that will determine everything about what happens next is not why did this happen to me? The question is who do I become now that it has? The third sign is that you have an unusual relationship with truth. You feel physically uncomfortable with dishonesty. You cannot let a lie sit in the room without it disturbing something in you. You have a compulsive need for things to be named accurately, for reality to be acknowledged as reality, for people to say what they actually mean. This is not a personality quirk. This is a moral orientation, and it is exactly the thing that makes living inside a narcissistic dynamic feel like psychological warfare, because gaslighting, which is the primary weapon of narcissistic control, is a sustained assault on exactly this part of you. Every time they told you that did not happen, or you are too sensitive, or you are remembering it wrong, they were targeting the most sacred thing you have, your commitment to what is real. The people who ultimately break free from narcissistic control are not the ones who cared less. They are the ones who cared so deeply about truth that eventually, no matter how much it cost them, they chose it over comfort. You have that in you, I know you do. Because you are here. Because something in you keeps seeking clarity even when every voice around you tells you to let it go. The fourth sign is that you have a history of being the one who changes things. Maybe it was in your family of origin, where you were the one who finally said out loud what everyone else silently knew but refused to name. Maybe it was in a friendship, where your willingness to have a hard conversation shifted something irrevocably. Maybe it is just a quiet knowing you have carried your whole life that you are not here to coast. You are here to contribute something that matters. People who are appointed to break patterns do not usually look like warriors. They look like the tired, gentle, exhausted, still-standing person who has been in the ring too long and keeps asking themselves why they cannot just walk away. But here is what that exhaustion actually is. It is not weakness. It is endurance. And endurance, when it is finally aimed in the right direction toward yourself and not just toward everyone else, becomes the most powerful force on the planet. The fifth sign is the one I want you to sit with longest. You have never fully lost yourself. Even at your lowest point in this dynamic, even in the moments when you did not recognize the person you had become, even when you were apologizing for your own existence and shrinking yourself down to fit inside whatever shape they needed you to take, there was still a voice. Small, maybe, barely audible under all the noise of their version of reality. But it was there. And it kept saying, this is not right, this is not who I am, something is wrong here. That voice, that unkillable inner knowing, is the most important thing I can point to, because a person whose self has been truly erased does not hear that voice anymore. The fact that you still hear it, the fact that it led you here, to this episode, to this search for answers, means that everything they tried to take from you is still intact. Hidden, bruised, definitely, but intact. Now I want to challenge you, and I am going to do it with love but without softening it. because you deserve honesty more than you deserve comfort right now. You have been waiting for something. You have been waiting for them to finally understand what they have done to you. You have been waiting for an apology that would make the confusion make sense. You have been waiting for them to become who you always believed they could be, so that your investment in them would not have been wasted. And that waiting, that beautiful, loyal, devastating waiting, is the thing that has been keeping you in the cage. The hard truth, the one your nervous system already knows but your heart keeps negotiating with, is this. A narcissist does not need to understand what they did to you in order for you to be free. You do not need their acknowledgement to validate your experience. You do not need them to finally see you in order to start seeing yourself. The closure you have been waiting for, the moment where it all makes sense and they take accountability and everything gets resolved, that moment is not coming from outside of you. It has to come from inside of you. And the way it comes is not through more explanation, more patience, more waiting. It comes through a decision, a simple, gutting, world-altering decision that your life and your wholeness matters more than this relationship. I know that decision feels impossible right now. I know that for someone like you who measures their own worth by their ability to love well and stay steady, walking away or setting a boundary so firm it changes everything feels like failure. It feels like abandonment. It might even feel like cruelty. But I need you to hear this clearly. Protecting yourself from someone who is harming you is not abandonment. Refusing to keep absorbing someone else's dysfunction at the cost of your own sanity is not cruelty. And choosing yourself after years or decades of choosing everyone else is not selfishness. It is the most profound act of love you can offer the world, because the world needs what you carry, and right now all of that is being poured into someone who cannot receive it. There is a psychological phenomenon that researchers who study empathy and trauma call the helper's burden. It describes what happens to highly empathetic people who become the designated emotional caretakers in relationships or families or systems where one person's needs perpetually consume all of the available oxygen. The helper slowly stops tending to their own interior life. They stop knowing what they need, what they want, what brings them joy, what their own truth sounds like, because they have been so completely oriented towards someone else's inner world that their own has become a foreign country. And the devastating part of the helper's burden is that it often feels virtuous while it is happening. It feels like love. It feels like loyalty. It feels like the right thing to do. Right up until the moment when there is nothing left to give and you realize you have not been loving freely. You have been paying a ransom, trying to keep the peace, trying to earn something that should have been given freely. So what does it actually look like, this appointed breaking of narcissistic control? What does it look like in real life, not in the abstract? It looks like the woman in her 40s who has spent 20 years managing her husband's moods, and one morning she stops. Not dramatically, not with a speech. She just stops rearranging herself. And he escalates, because escalation is what happens when control meets resistance, and she does not fold. She stays steady. She has a name for what is happening now. She understands that the escalation is not evidence that she is wrong. It is evidence that the pattern is being disrupted. And that steadiness, that informed, grounded, no longer gaslit steadiness, is the beginning of something that changes. Not just her life, but potentially the entire family system. Her children are watching. It looks like the person who grew up with a narcissistic parent and spent their whole childhood being the emotional regulator for someone who should have been regulating for them, who finally, in their 30s or 40s, says enough and begins the grief of mourning a parent who is still alive, who stops performing okayness and starts telling the truth, first to themselves, then to a therapist, then to their children, breaking a cycle that might have run for generations. It looks like the employee who finally stops covering for the narcissistic boss, who names the dynamic to human resources, not to cause drama, but because they understand now that their silence has been enabling harm that extends beyond just them. None of these are dramatic acts of heroism. They are quiet, courageous, costly acts of truth-telling, and they ripple outward in ways that cannot always be seen immediately, but are always felt. Here is what psychology tells us about people who successfully break free from narcissistic control and go on to genuinely heal. They almost always describe a moment of recognition, a moment where something clicked into place and they finally saw the pattern for what it was rather than what they had been told it was. And almost universally, they described that moment not as a moment of anger, though anger often followed, but as a moment of profound sadness. Because when you truly see a narcissistic dynamic clearly for the first time, what you grieve is not just the relationship. You grieve the version of it you believed in. You grieve the person you were before the self-doubt crept in. And that grief, that honest, clear-eyed grief, is not a setback. It is the beginning of your return to yourself. You were not put in this dynamic to be destroyed by it. You were put in it because you have a capacity for depth that most people never develop. You have been forged in something that was not fair and was not your fault, and you have emerged, maybe not fully yet, but you are emerging with a kind of wisdom and clarity and compassion that the world genuinely needs. There are people in your future, people you have not met yet, who are going to need exactly what you have learned from exactly this experience. There are children, maybe your own, maybe children you will influence in ways you cannot predict, who need to see someone who looked at a controlling, diminishing dynamic and said no, who chose truth over comfort, who chose themselves not out of selfishness, but out of a deep understanding that you cannot pour from a vessel that has been emptied by someone who never intended to fill it back up. I want to close by saying something I hope you carry with you long after this episode ends. The most powerful thing about you has never been your ability to endure. I know it might feel that way. I know you might wear your endurance like a badge, like the proof that you are strong enough, good enough, loving enough. But your endurance was never the point. The point was always what you do when you stop enduring and start living. The point is, the person you are becoming right now, in this exact season, as you begin to understand that being appointed does not mean being sacrificed, it means being trusted. Trusted to see clearly, trusted to tell the truth, trusted to choose yourself in a way that gives everyone around you permission to do the same. You are not too much. You have never been too much. You have simply been in the wrong place for everything you carry. And the moment you stop pouring yourself into something that cannot hold you, you will realize that the world outside that dynamic is vast and warm and full of people who will not just take from what you offer, but who will meet you there. That is the life you were appointed for. Not the one where you keep shrinking, the one where you finally, fully, unashamedly take up your space.